This has been quite the trip down the history of Seiyu units, hasn't it? After covering the 70s and 80s that were all about braving unknown territory, taking a step in the 90s to see what was like for Seiyu units to become phenomenons, and then reach the noughties and see all the experimentalism and innovation, it's time to cover the golden era of Seiyu units, the fourth generation. Let's kick off this episode of Seiyu Lounge. Welcome to Seiyu Lounge. I am your host Vanessa, and today's topic is the fourth generation of Seiyu units, 2010 up until 2014. This is the golden era for Seiyu units. The last time you could say that joining a Seiyu unit was actually something Seiyu were excited about. This is an era that sounds like yesterday to me, as it was right when I started following and thus covering music by Seiyu units at The Hand That Feeds HQ. Let's see what this generation brought to the spotlight. How was the music panorama for Seiyu units in the early 10s? The early 10s were a time of change for Seiyu trying to have their go at becoming solo artists or joining Seiyu units. The popularity boom of the Uta no Prince-sama franchise put Seiyu on the spotlight like no other anime or project had managed to before. This was the first time in almost 20 years that Seiyu were getting such a big stage to shine. It was thanks to the popularity of the Uta no Prince-sama franchise that there was a boom in Seiyu unit debuts, with most Seiyu trying to quickly cash in on what they thought would be a temporary trend. Little did they know that the Uta no Prince-sama franchise would end up becoming one of the most important and influential games and music franchises ever. But they were right about trying to cash in on the popularity of the project, because in no less than 4 years, Seiyu units stopped being a trend and started to fall into oblivion. Which music genres were prominent? The early 10s were all about bubblegum pop music. Short, sweet, with insanely catchy choruses and EDM-driven instrumentals. The focus was not on the content, but on the performance. How engaging it was, how fast it stood out. This may be a reason why music by most of the Seiyu units in this fourth generation feels like it lacks substance. It is entertaining, for sure, but it is empty. There was rock and jazz in some capacity, but few were the Seiyu units venturing to those sonorities, instead playing it safe with pop rock. Influences. For sure, the previous experiments by Cell Division, J-Addict, Hiroshi Kami and Daisuke Ono, and Pheroman were taken as an inspiration as to what Seiyu units could do to become popular while releasing music that stood out. However, I do find that some of the units in this generation share a couple of details in their image, sound, or at times approach to music with the second generation of Seiyu units, which is to say, with EMU and Vice. Music quality. In this generation, the quality of the music was up there with every single other CD release in Japan. The recordings were of high quality, there was attention to detail in the compositions. Actually, there were many more composers working with Seiyu units, breathing a new air to a niche part of the music industry that was, in a way, on the verge of being oversaturated. Depending on the artist though, there may be some exceptions, but in general, music from this generation still sounds good today. Stemming from radio, anime, music projects or TV shows. After the success that some Seiyu units stemming from anime had in the past, and even after the success that Utapri had in this decade, kickstarting a new era in the music industry for Seiyu, there were barely any Seiyu units stemming from anime series debuting. Seiyu units started to be tied to radio shows. And it makes sense, especially after Hiroshi Kamiya and Daisuke Ono having been so popular while stemming from a traditional entertainment medium. So there were plenty of seiyuu units stemming from radio shows making their debut in this generation. Not all were good, but there was an attempt at seeing what they could pull off, seeing the success that the Dear Girl Stories duo was having since 2007. There were also 2D music projects starting to appear on the radar, such as Marginal Number 4, now called Pythagoras Production, and Scuta. While these certainly were impactful, their units are 2D, not seiyuu units, so I'm not going to talk about Utapri, Scuta, or Marginal Number 4. I leave that for an episode about 2D units. Units that marked this generation of seiyuu units. This generation had all types of seiyuu units debuting. Connect was an exciting duo. Kamyu saw one of the biggest solo talents of this generation shine. Max Boys was genuinely good and served as the launching pad for Toshiki Masuda's career, especially when it comes to being one of the most sought after seiyuu for singing in 2D music projects. Animarus appeared as a group focused on nurturing seiyuu into becoming good singers and show their talents. Seki Tokonishi saw old friends teaming up to sing, between many other interesting concepts. But let's dive into the seiyuu units that actually brought something new to the music industry or ended up impacting it with something completely different from usual. Elekita Round Zero. Elekita Round Zero was big on their pop rock sound with a dramatic, almost melancholic twist. Many seiyuu units were making an effort to debut with an easy listening, mainly dance pop and EDM sound. Elekita Round Zero saw that and went the other way, straying away from the trend that was starting to install itself in the seiyuu and music industries. The unit consisted of Shinosuke Tachibana and Satoshi Hino being active from 2010 up until 2020. The seiyuu unit stemmed from the variety seiyuu group, Project Daba, as well as from the radio show Hino Satoshi vs Tachibana Shinosuke Heisei Nippon Kunitorigasen Radio. But why did I bring this unit to the spotlight? Because both Hino and Tachibana were active lyricists for the seiyuu unit, being responsible for the dramatic, almost theatrical vibe that they had. With that being said, this was rare. Before them, there had been Slapstick and Pharaoh Men that were active as lyricists, dictating the tone and vibe of their music. So this was rare. The unit brought a couple of new things to the spotlight that no other seiyuu unit had done before. Elekita Round Zero was focused on having a perfect balance between the timeless beauty of Japanese music and contemporary rock and jazz. The unit was in charge of most of its creative process, with the concepts for each CD being discussed between Satoshi Hino and Shinosuke Tachibana, something that made their music stand out for the passion and genuine care behind it. This was also the first seiyuu unit to feature group songs, and within the same releases, solo versions of those songs, showcasing the individual talents of its members. Funk and jazz started to be prominent in the unit's sound later on in their career, setting a mature vibe to their catchy and loungy approach to drama and romance. Despite stemming from a radio show, Elekita Round Zero wasn't creating music that you'd usually find as theme songs for radio shows. Despite being a seiyuu unit, Elekita Round Zero's artistry put them on a different level in comparison to most of the seiyuu units in this generation. The care for songwriting and having a hand in the concepts they were exploring stands out as unique things for Elekita Round Zero. Although the unit was never that big, having experienced a small period of time in which there was genuine excitement for their music, Elekita Round Zero was doing something other units weren't and ended up opening the doors for Seiyu units in the 5th generation, mainly Kashikomi and U-Make, to not be afraid of taking over and creating a dramatic, emotional brand of rock that strays away from the trends. MOE. Although not an exceptional Seiyu unit that has influenced generations of Seiyu units, I find MOE's concept to be unique and worth talking about. Debuted in 2011, MOE, Seiyu units consisting of Wataru Hatano and Takuma Terashima, and stemming from the radio show Hatano Terashima Radio 2D Love, specializes in covering anime and games theme songs or character songs. That's a pretty simple concept, but the fact that they have an 11-year career doing so, consistently releasing albums, 10 at the time of recording this episode, is quite impressive. Each CD has a different concept in which the songs to be covered will fit. That leads to consistent CDs featuring songs from the 80s up until now. And even though the unit is far from being popular, it has a devoted fan base that has been following the challenges that Wataru Hatano and Takuma Terashima find in tackling popular Ani songs. DAT. When it comes to Seiyu units stemming from radio shows that make or have made an impact, DAT has to be mentioned. The EDM dance pop with a pinch of rock duo arrived with a powerful sound, unique chemistry, and approach to music that caught many people off guard. Double vocals and double rappers, DAT was all about its energetic and elegant dance music with a perfect balance between music quality and impactful performances. Daisuke Ono being the lead dancer and Takayuki Kondo being an impressive combo of a singer and rapper was something I was not expecting when this duo announced its debut, and I was mesmerized. Like myself, many people quickly found themselves drawn to their catchy pop and addictive EDM sound, something the duo had as its trademark. And while the group was releasing this music made to hit the dance floor and top charts, they were actually creating music for their radio show. This level of professionalism and dedication to their performances translated into several live shows with powerful performances both as a unit as well as for their solo tracks. Much in line with what Elekita Round Zero were doing, DAT also wrote lyrics to some of their songs, with Takayuki Kondo quickly showcasing his lyricist talents for the group. Even if DAT was never really a big Seiyu unit or had the impact that other pop-driven units had in the past, it was certainly the first ever Seiyu unit to be all about EDM music, striking a perfect balance between impactful performances and pure entertainment. Trignal. To wrap up this episode is Trignal. Now, this is a Seiyu unit that started activities in 2012, stemming from a radio show as well. But what the unit was in its debut years and what it is now are two completely different things. Trignal, Seiyu unit consisting of Ryohei Kimura, Tsubasa Yonaga, and Takuya Guchi made their debut in 2012 under Kiramune and was all about its bubbly, generic pop sound. Yes, the idea of a Seiyu trio with different charms between them was kind of interesting, and given how all three Seiyu were rising stars at that time, there was genuine excitement about them. But Trignal's music was downright bad at the start, and that was because Kiramune was trying to emulate other groups instead of finding a concept and sound that suited the three Seiyu as a unit. The melodic, honeyed singing by Ryohei Kimura, Takuya Guchi's double threat as a good singer and rapper, and Tsubasa Yonaga's gentle, youthful vocals clicked in 2015, and the rest is history. It took some time for Trignal to find its footing as a Seiyu unit, but as soon as One Step Forward was released, Trignal was unstoppable. rising quickly into what is one of the best Seiyu units in the past decade and the best from this fourth generation of Seiyu units. As its members matured, so did the group's image and sound, and that escalated in the impressive releases of Back to Basic in 2017 and Tricolore in 2018. As time passed and trends appeared and faded, as other Seiyu units joined the industry, Trignol managed to withstand all and emerged on top of all Seiyu units. Trignol is one of the most versatile and complete Seiyu units, with all members showing in 2018 their talents as composers and lyricists with a set of surprising performances. The unit would end up influencing and setting the blueprint for other Seiyu units signed to Kiramune, namely Uncle Bomb and Sparklu. Selling out live shows and tours, being one if not the most anticipated group performing at Kira Fez, being one of the best-selling Seiyu units of all time. Trignol rose to the top of the ladder, taking the spot as one of the most successful and popular Seiyu units in the past decade. Trignol has been on a hiatus since 2018, only recently announcing their participation at Kiramune's Fan Fun Time 2022. But from what they did and where they left things off, there's hopefully plenty more for them to give to their fans. And this wraps up the talk about the fourth generation of Seiyu units. Innovating and finding their own colors was something that Elekita Round Zero, MOE, DAT, and Trignol managed to do. The drama and theatricality in the rock sound of Elekita Round Zero lives on in the fifth generation of Seiyu units. DAT may no longer be around, but as Trado, the duo continues to trail its unique path, and of course, what Trignol pulled off was perfected as a blueprint for Sparklu. As you can see, each Seiyu unit brought something new to the spotlight and helped perfect this Seiyu unit formula. This was the last generation of Seiyu units to be wildly well received and be popular. There were plenty of awesome and refreshing ideas in these groups, and even those that I haven't explored in detail but mentioned had or have unique things about them that make them worth checking out. So tell me, what do you think is the thing that made this generation of Seiyu units stand out? And do you think that would be a reason why the following generations failed to attract attention? Let me know in the comments on YouTube, and remember, leave your comments as complex or as simple as they may be, and you can be featured on upcoming episodes of Seiyu Lounge. If you enjoyed this episode and don't want to miss the Hand That Feeds HQ's weekly male Seiyu and music-related content, hit the subscribe button. I'll return next week with another episode of Seiyu Lounge. Thank you for listening, and see you guys around.